What's up guys, and welcome to another episode of El Jardín Perdido. Today we're talking about microclimate. All right, so a little while back, it's been less than a year for sure, but earlier in the season, I did a little experiment where I grew a few kiwis from seed. 4 of them did pretty well. And so what I did, only because in the past, kiwis have not fared well in this climate. Usually it's the heat of the summers here, triple digits, high humidity, that they can't hack. So what I did was I planted them in 4 different spots in my front yard to see where they would thrive and to see where they wouldn't thrive so much. This was a good test too, because we had a prolonged drought that even with supplemental water and the heat, the clay was just too hard, compacted. I admittedly didn't mulch that heavily this year, so that was a attributing factor, but we still gave them the test. So when I just looked around here, 2 of the 4 survived, and we're gonna look around in the yard a little bit and see what factors could have attributed to that. So yeah, kiwis do fine throughout our winters and everything. They're deciduous, they go to sleep, they usually spring back, but in the past, I've had them not fare so well. On a separate video, I'll probably make clones of these because kiwi are pretty easy to clone, and plant them in even more spots because I would like a kiwi vine to thrive somewhere in my yard. So phase 2 of this will be making some clones and putting them elsewhere in the backyard, so long as these last 2 stay standing. But yeah, let's go check out the different spots that I planted them in and how the microclimates help them survive. So this was our first spot. Let me zoom out a little bit so you guys get a better feel for what's going on here. I do have the carport, so it's technically partial shade. So the sun is coming from this direction most of the summer. So it could be that it's still got too much sunlight. But yeah, as you can see here, I was just kind of weeding around here, and the soil is in decent condition. It's actually not, you know, that clay I described. It's been conditioned enough. It's a little bit sandy, but I mean, it's a good consistency considering. But this is our guy. I did a scratch test, and I think it was just too much direct sunlight. Even though it had a little microclimate from this citrus, it just didn't seem to be enough. Another factor could be maybe it was too close to the concrete and that was radiating excess heat. But oh, you know what? I just did an additional scratch test and there's still a little bit of life in that. So maybe he'll bounce back, but it does say that it's not the ideal environment through the summer for him. Not too far from that area. Zooming out, this is what we're looking at. Little banana canopy. My bananas aren't doing that well because this Texas lilac has probably taken over a little too much. I did prune it back quite a bit this year, but I guess it wasn't enough. Too much competition for the bananas. But I mean, as we're zooming out, it is kind of nice ornamentally. You know, we don't have to get food from everything. But tucked away in here in this little microclimate, you can see it's very shaded in here. We just got some rain, so they got some second life here. Not that it was dying, but it wasn't thriving, as you can see. But we're looking pretty good here. Another factor to this is that because they're planted next to bananas, I have mulched really heavily here. So that could be another factor, but I'm putting my money on the fact that throughout the harshness, it was shaded a lot better. Another thing that kind of surprised me about this area is bananas like a lot of water and they take in a lot of water, and the competition didn't seem to phase it. Okay, as we continue, I have the arbor that I've featured in a couple of videos, but this is my front yard still, probably less than 20 feet away. But what I did was I planted one on either side of the arch, anticipating we could get some vinage going through here. I would think it would be ideal because we still have a canopy on this vine, and so it could trellis but have shade. That to me seems like a nice place for kiwi. So I planted one here, and I'm not seeing it anywhere in sight. And yeah, I think it could have been a goner quite a while ago. It's a little confusing because it's next to this Turk's cap. Has somewhat similar leaf, as at least like camouflage wise. Oh, you know what? That's where I labeled it. And it looks to be long gone. And on that same note, with the summer sun, this is where the afternoon sun's coming from. So it could be that that was directly just blazing this thing, because all this canopy and stuff still leaves that open. Whereas just 2 feet over, probably a little more or less 2 feet, this guy is doing absolutely fine. And that's on the other side of the arbor. But you see it's, you know, getting kind of distilled sunlight right now from all of the stuff that I have growing in front of it. So it's not getting that harsh direct sunlight, and that seemed to work out for it. So this was kind of a loose experiment, but I think it was pretty successful in showing me that things might thrive even though it's in my front yard. You know, a few feet here or there, give and take, you never know. So I don't know how avid you guys are, my followers, about propagating your own stuff, but I highly encourage it, and this is one of the factors. You know, if I bought something on Etsy, which I've done before, if I bought a vine from Etsy and it was $20, I'd probably only get 1 or 2. If you have the money, go ahead and do that. Sometimes it's beneficial to get 2. Another thing this could represent is if you get a brand new tree or whatever, keep it in the pot for a while and put it in a location you desire. And if it starts looking really bad just in the pot, if you've slowly hardened it off, that's an indication that maybe that's not the best place for it to be and you could move it around. Whereas the alternative, if you were to propagate your own plants or whatever, you know, ideally, if you're planting seeds, whatever, if you're cloning them, ideally make some insurance, have a couple extra and plant them in various parts of your yard, which I do all the time. Sometimes I just think more the merrier. As a permaculturalist, I don't want to baby many of these plants. Especially in the winter, there are some plants I'm gonna have to baby throughout the winter, you know, because I push the zone fine. But it is beneficial to plant more than one, because you've got, depending on your climate. I mean, for me, I've got a few things going against me. I've got hurricanes, which can cause flooding and high winds. I've got really hot summers and humid summers, because a lot of these plants don't like having their feet soaked. And then in the same alternative, we have these little, it's been 2 years in a row, maybe 3 years, that we've had these droughts. And it's kind of reminding me of Mediterranean climate, where the summer months are really dry. And that's something I've, you know, had to adapt with. But then we have the winter as well, which this growing zone is crazy, because we're considered 10A now, according to the new map. But I still consider 9B, and you know, we're getting the worst of the summers, and then we're getting pretty frigid winters. It's one thing when a 20-degree blows over overnight, but the past, I'd say 5 years, we've had at least a week of sustained freeze, and those hard freezes, a lot of things can tolerate, including tropicals, can tolerate these dips, but when we have these sustained freezes, it adds another element to it. So I do encourage you guys, the whole premise of this video was to test microclimates. Like I said, you don't have to buy a bunch of plants. You can keep it potted and move it around and see where it does better. Or, you know, in this case, to me, it was very beneficial to have 4 different plants, realistically put them in the ground, because ideally, that's how I like to grow things. I like to put them in the ground, because if they're happy in that location, they're gonna thrive, and that's gonna be their happiest spot, with their roots in the ground, you know, because that's how plants like to grow typically. All right, guys, well, I hope you found this video helpful. If this is your first time watching, consider subscribing. Also, likes and comments help with the algorithm. And if you do have any sincere questions, feel free to put those below. I typically respond in a day or so. All right, guys, well, that's gonna do it for today's video. As always, thanks for tuning in. Until next time.